guys, this is our intro to throwing in the potter's wheel, and as this will be your first time working, we're starting with the cylinder, the most basic of forms. Once you master that, you will be able to create a lot of other variety of pieces on the wheel, like bowls, vases, plates, that sort of thing. So we're going to go over the basics. Before we start, things that you'll need: so you need your bat. Place that bat on your wheel head. You should have your bucket here with your variety of tools. Fill your bucket with just 2 to 3 inches of water. Just enough water to keep your hands wet. And if you're right-handed, the wheel direction here should be going counterclockwise if you're right-handed. If you're left-handed, it's going to be going clockwise. And you can change that on the side of the wheel. So we're going to get started. Body positioning is really important for this. Make sure you're sitting as close to the wheel as possible. Your legs should be hugging the splash pan to brace your upper body to keep yourself stabilized. You are going to be pushing the pedal to power your wheel, so get that comfortable as well. You're going to have about 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds of clay, and our goal here for step 1 is centering. So forcefully place that into the center and get your hands wet, a little water on there. The clay should always be shiny. You're going to make sure your wheel is turned on, and it is. And I'm right-handed, so it's going counterclockwise. Now, body positioning. Your legs are hugging the splash pan at all times. So you're bracing your body that way, stabilizing yourself. Your elbows, okay, they're going to need to be bracing down onto your legs. There are 2 ways to center body positioning as far as your upper body. You can either have equal weight in both elbows, like I have here, or another way is to take your non-dominant hand, so my left elbow, and tuck that into your side. So left of your belly button, right where your pelvic bone, so your hip socket is. And that way now you have a lever. And with that lever, you can lean in and really, with the heel of your hand, you can apply a lot of force that way. So your left hand would be here, right hand balled up into a fist, and you could be applying pressure from the top. My thumb is lifting up. Either way though, your hands should be touching each other and also the bat to stabilize. Stabilizing is key. So what does centering look like? Right now you can see, even just looking at the clay, it's wobbling, but my hands, I'm feeling that it's moving. It's not centered. It should be running perfectly smooth, no movement underneath your hands once it's centered. So I'm going to be leaning in, using leverage now from your upper body as well, because a lot of this is not hand strength or arm strength, even though that does help. It has to do with how you're using leverage and using your upper body. You're also stabilizing again with your legs, so hug the splash pan. Lean into it. Now you can tell, maybe here, that it's not as shiny. I'm feeling there's more friction building up. I'm reaching for a little bit of water just with one hand, going back down. So I'm applying pressure from all areas, not just the top, not just the sides. Lean into it, get a little more water. Into it. So I'm showing you how to center with equal amount of weights in both elbows. Again, the other way is to take that left elbow, lock it into your hip socket, leaning down. Okay, so I'm getting centered. To get centered, you can do a step called coning. This also conditions the clay to create more consistency. So I'm slowly pulling up. My right hand is enveloped by my left hand. I'm applying most of the pressure down here. So slowly up. A little water. I'm going to be pressing down with my fist. Left hand is supporting here. Again, my left side of my hand, my pinky is touching the bat. Always have that contact. I'm not applying pressure directly from the top, it's more the side. And again, these hands are touching, just like this. Down and in. try that again, coning up. Don't squeeze too hard. A lot of the challenge here is your tactile pressure. Understanding how much pressure to apply, what are the limits of the clay. We're trying to figure out how we can get the clay to do what we want it to do. And that takes a lot of time and practice. All right, let's do this one more time. Cone. Slow and steady up and down. Now for your task in clay 1, okay, good, get this centered now. It is hard to talk and to throw at the same time because you're having to access both hemispheres of your brain, your left brain, right brain, if you heard of that theory. So that's why I had to pause there for a second. Takes 100% of your focus. All right, so what I was getting to is that your cylinder, we want it to not be too wide because we're not trying to make a plate. It has a wider base. Maybe 4 inches wide. Should be a biscuit shape now. So you see I'm flattening the top. Bring that down. Kind of karate chop here, the side of my hand. Again, my left hand is locking in, always touching to steady yourself. Now with each step, you're going to slow the wheel down. So I'm slowing it down a bit. A little more water. Centering will take you multiple tries. So the first couple sessions, just going to be practicing how to center. It's a little bit discouraging, but if you have the right mindset and knowing up front that it is going to take time, once you get to that point, you've accomplished a lot, and from there, you'll continue to grow and gain confidence. So just stay positive. Step 2, I need to open this. So to open it, I'm going to take, with the number of ways to do it, I'm going to take the pad of my thumb, so not the point where my nail is, but the pad of my thumb. Again, holding out here. You're going to start pressing down. You can use both thumbs, or you can take the pads of your 2 fingers here on the right and guide and press down this way. So I'm pushing down. Don't want to go all the way to the bottom because then you will have no base or foot for your cylinder. You want to stop with about 1/4 to 1/2 inch, somewhere around there, so let's measure it. This is your needle tool. Poke till it hits the back. Slide your finger down. Now that's how much I have left. That's a little bit more than 1/2 inch. If you leave too much in your base, that is a flaw, but also it will take too long for the base to dry. Thick bases, or really anything that's thick that takes too long to dry, the trapped moisture could cause it to explode. So a rule of thumb is always 1/4 inch. I'm going to open a little bit more. There we go. That's good. I've opened it. See what that looks like. Now I'm going to make it wider. So to do that, I'm going to still use my left thumb, the pad of my left thumb. I'm going to curl my thumb back towards my palm. My right 2 fingers here are going to guide. Again, I'm letting my fingers drag along the bat here to steady myself. Go a little bit slower, slow and steady. Trying to create a flat floor. You don't want your thumb to start rising up as you get out towards the wall. It's all about practicing control. All right, so I've widened it. It's a little bit uneven in the bottom, so I'm going to flatten that out. This step is called compressing. You can use your sponge to do that. I'm going to be pressing here, starting in the inside again, hands are touching. And slowly, slowly drag out. We'll do that again. So it's nice and even, but the compression will get any air pockets up, but also align the clay particles so it strengthens it. Otherwise, you could get these little cracks that form in the bottom. It's called an S-crack. As clay dries, it will shrink and pull apart a bit. Any extra water in there, so you always want to keep soaking up the water too. Can cause problems, so soak that up. All right, we've centered step 1. We've opened step 2. Step 3, is pulling your walls. So, to pull your walls, a number of ways to do this. If you're right-handed, you're going to be working towards the right side. If you're left-handed, you're going to be working towards the left. And you're actually going to need to lean your body either way, whichever direction you need to be working. So I'm right-handed. I'm now leaning, applying most of my pressure to my elbow here on my right leg. My left elbow, since I'm leaning down, I cannot reach that down to my leg anymore. It's very uncomfortable. So I still need to stabilize this arm. I'm going to take it and tuck it into my stomach. So like around your belly button area. Lock that in. My right hand is going to be out, if you imagine this is a clock, around 3 or 4 o'clock is where I'm going to be at. You can throw with just your hands. You can throw with a sponge. You can throw with the tips of your fingers. You can do knuckle pulls. I'm going to show you all 3 of those. And with practice, you'll figure out what makes the most sense to you. Now, slowing the wheel down again. I have some water in here. I'm going to soak that up. You can take your sponge and apply a little bit of water on the outside. It's another use for your tool of your sponge. I'm going to need to apply pressure starting at the bottom, applying pressure here. My left hand, again, my elbow's locked in to my side. My middle finger, you could also use your pointer finger. I like to just use the middle finger here, pushing out. So opposing forces, but this is what it looks like. My right hand is always going to be a little bit lower because I can touch the bad out here. My left hand, I have the floor of the clay. I can't go all the way to the bottom. So it's going to be staggered. And then as I pull, keep those hands the same distance apart until you reach the top. Notice my hands are touching. You gotta have those touching. You don't want them separate. You don't want it like this. My left hand is at like 2 o'clock, my right hand's at 4, that's no good. Both at the same spot. Slow the wheel down. I'm going to be pushing in, pushing out. Notice there's a bit of a bump forming here. I'm going to be lifting that bump or that shelf up with my right hand. My left hand is kind of going along for the ride and stabilizing. Here we go. Go slow. I see a lot of beginners moving way too fast. The slower the wheel moves, the slower your hands move. If you throw without a sponge, you can actually see the rings. If you look closely, there are rings on there, so if you can count how many of those rings there are, it's about 8 or 9. That's how many revolutions my fingers made around the clay. You can throw the sponge. A lot of beginners, I think, are a little more comfortable with this. You don't feel like your fingers are digging into the cylinder. I just wrap that around my index finger. Again, starting at the bottom, get my hands wet. Again, notice where my outside thumb is. It's that point of contact here. Supporting. Now this time, I'm pushing in, pushing out. I want to intentionally go in a little bit more. I'll explain why in a second. So watch that clay, travel up, slowly release. Now with each pull, I forgot that this step, the first pull, you want to reinforce and reset the rim. Index finger, left and pointer and thumb. Looks like a backwards letter P. I'm just reinforcing, so I'm not really pressing, just letting my fingers sort of drag to smooth things out, but to keep the rim from getting too thin or to recenter it. It is very likely, it will definitely happen, where you'll get your clay centered and then off-centered as you move on. But you can, depending on how severe it is, you can get it back to being centered. So reset your rim with each pull. Now, what I was talking about is as you're pulling, you want to actually go in. Imagine you're making like a volcano. The force of the wheel, centripetal force, is spinning the clay, and it's going to want to cause the top to get wider and go out. So you're working against that force by pulling in a little bit more. But you're not really going to see that volcano shape because of the force of the wheel, so it kind of balances each other out. So keep that in mind as you're pulling, trying to make your cylinder. You don't want it here to look like that. You're trying to keep it straight. Now here's another helpful tip. If the rim gets too wide, you can bring it back in. This is called collaring. So your hands are in the shape of almost a triangle here. A little water in them. Start a little bit below where it starts to go wider. Slowly guiding that up, 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 slow and steady, and release. All pressure that you apply, go slow. Slowly approach, slowly release. That will help you prevent it from getting off center. You also want to make sure that you are never touching the clay when it's not spinning. Because if for my next pull, which I'll show you the knuckle pull next, if I'm holding this here and then I start the wheel, I could actually jolt my hands and cause the clay to go off center. So you notice the clay is always moving and then I approach. I kind of hover and then approach. Knuckle pull. Slowly pull up, up, up. Slowly release. Reset the rim. Any water in there, soak that up. Let's do, I think I got 1 or 2 more pulls. I'm gonna go back just to using my middle and pointer finger. Pushing in, scooping and collecting that clay, guiding it up. Here we go. Let's do 1 more pull. This time we'll go back to the sponge. Slow it down a bit. I'm intentionally pushing in a little bit more at the top. You saw it kind of flared out. I was applying more pressure from my outside hand. It's never going to be an equal 50-50 when you're throwing, even for a cylinder where the walls are straight, because you have that centripetal force of the wheel. Okay, this beautiful cylinder. Now we're going to use some tools to clean it up. We have our ribs here. I'll use the metal rib and use the flat side of that. Whenever you're applying pressure to the clay, you always want to counteract that or reinforce it from the opposite direction. So I want to smooth the outside, but I don't want to just apply force here with the rib because it could cause it to cave in. So I'm going to take my left hand and slide that down, getting my thumb out of the way. And it's going to be right directly across from where I'm applying pressure with the rib. I'm holding this at a 45. Okay, so it's not like this. It's going to be angled in. Letting it drag along the bat. You hear that scratching noise, it's steadying it. Can also move it up. My cylinder's a little bit taller than the rib. Good, clean that off. If the inside needs cleaned up again, you can use the sponge. If you need to trim off the top of the rim, you can take your needle tool, slide your index finger out, stabilize, slowly make a mark. Notice my left thumb is supporting and my elbow of my left hand is on my side. Left index finger is on the inside, waiting to feel that needle poke through, and when it does, you stop the wheel, pull that off. I didn't have to do that step, but if you notice the rim is uneven or it's really thin, you can do that. So reinforcing the rim. You can also use the sponge for this step. Modeling tool with a sharp point. I want to get the bottom of this cleaned up. There's a little bit of a flare, a little extra clay. I want the walls to be nice and straight. So check this out. Supporting with my left hand. Start a little bit above. Just letting that glide, and then I'm going to press this down. You can see now the clay cleaned up. Do that one more time. Okay, now looking at this a little bit lower, I want to check this out and see if I need to clean anything else. I want to clean it up one more time, trying to get as smooth, consistent as possible. And that's it, guys. Don't forget to cut this off. You have your wire here. Wrap that around your fingers a couple times so that your thumbs come in contact with the bat. You can either do this motion without the wheel moving, or you can have it slowly moving. Pull towards yourself. I'm gonna stop the wheel, just as I'm about to reach the other side, which is right here, and finish that out. If you need to clean up your wheel, you can use your sponge to do that. There's a little bit extra clay on there. What I ask you guys to do is once you have thrown, you put your initials and your period. Just write it in the slip that's on the back, and that's it. So, cleanup, we will go over that in class. I wish you all the best. Again, stay positive. Throwing on the wheel is one of the most challenging things you'll probably ever end up doing, but it's also one of the most rewarding tasks, and I think you guys will really end up enjoying it and falling in love with clay.